Welcome to Friday, June 14th, and today we are continuing our study of the prophecies of Jesus. This time we're going to be talking about the healings of Jesus, and they were prophesied in the Old Testament. So the first one is that there was prophecy that the blind would see. Where do we see that? In Isaiah 29:18 it says, "In that day the deaf shall hear the words of a book, and out of their gloom and darkness the eyes of the blind shall see." So right there, we're not just seeing that the blind will see, but that the deaf will hear. So where do we see that? In Matthew 9:30 it says, "And their eyes were opened, and Jesus sternly warned them, 'See that no one knows about it.'" Then in Matthew 11:5, "The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. Lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. And the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them." Then in Matthew 12:22, it says, Then a demon-oppressed man who was blind and mute was brought to him, and he healed him, so that the man spoke and saw. In Matthew 20:34, Jesus in pity touched their eyes, and immediately they recovered their sight and followed him. In Matthew 21:14, the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. And then in Mark 10:52, Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way. So we're also talked about the fact that the deaf will hear. And in Isaiah 35:5-6, "Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped." Where do we see this? Well, we already saw some of these passages in Matthew 11:5, in Mark 7:31-37. This is where a deaf man is healed. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. And taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said, "Ephphatha," which means be opened. And his ears were opened, and his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And Jesus charged them to tell no one. But the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, "He has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." In Mark 9:25, "And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, 'You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again.'" So we also saw that the lame are healed, and this is one that we've already seen in Isaiah 35:6. "Then shall the lame man leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute sing for joy. For waters break forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert." In Matthew 15:30-31, "And great crowds came to him, bringing with them the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and they put them at his feet, and he healed them. So that the crowd wondered when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled healthy, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they glorified God of Israel." And Matthew 21:14, "And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them." So we also saw that God promised a time when the mute would speak, and we have seen this over and over again in these passages. What does this mean? It means that Old Testament prophesied the blind would see, the deaf would hear, the mute would speak, and the lame would walk. And Jesus made it happen. And Jesus can do that for us. The Bible also tells us that Jesus provides for all of our needs and draws us closer and closer to him. Here's the key for us. We have to have a willing spirit. We have to be willing to go into that deeper relationship with him and allow the Holy Spirit to work through us. And that means being humble and putting yourself to the side. Today is Friday, so I'm going to remind you there's no video again until Monday. Have a wonderful day. God bless, and keep walking the walk.